As a female journalist, I'm wondering, have there been any special challenges that you've had, that you've felt throughout your career being a female journalist? Do you find, like, when you look at it, do you believe that there is still a glass ceiling? And if so, is it something that's changed over, for instance, your career?
I think there are challenges and pluses to being a woman in cable news. I think the pluses are sometimes somebody might open the door, you know, if they see, you know, Rita Cosby or whoever it is, if it's me versus a guy who's 6'4", you know, banging on the door,
Sure.
They might say, oh, it's a little more friendly face or a little, you know, a little less imposing.
Yeah.
So I think there are pluses, and I also think sometimes people feel like, oh, maybe she understands more. It's maybe there's if you look at some of the books, the different psychological books that are out there, they'll say, you know, women are better listeners. I don't know if that's always the case, but you tell me. You don't want to get in a fight with your girlfriend or your wife or whatever. But I think sometimes that can help. There's a communication, and women, I think, are great communicators. So I think sometimes you can hit a sensitivity and get someone to talk who maybe isn't ready to talk if maybe a guy is on the door. And some of that has nothing to do with maybe the woman-man thing. It's the approach. So I think that there's some wonderful pluses in that regard. I remember, you know, I went down to a prison. I did a story years and years ago in a Mexican prison, and I think if I was a guy banging on the door and trying to get in and do the story where it was showing some corruption, even Mexican government corruption at that point, they probably wouldn't have let me in. And I think when they saw, you know, blonde Rita Cosby knocking on the door, oh, she can do no harm. Turned out they were wrong. But
now, what would be, let's say that, like with the blonde Rita Cosby, what would be a challenge of being that? Like, are you worried about being labeled when you talk about that? Like, as a male journalist, it may be a cliche, but, you know, I don't think there's as much pressure on men when it comes to appearance, when it comes to personal lives and things like that. I'm wondering what you think about that.
No, I think there is still a little more work that women have to do to get to that point. I mean, even if you look at who's in sort of the key roles on all the networks. I mean, we do have Katie Couric now, and I thought that's terrific to see a woman in that role. And you see women in a lot of different positions. I mean, we see Condoleezza Rice has taken such a central role in the administration. I mean, when you see women getting to that level, I'm very proud to see that. But I also think women still do have to work a little bit harder to get to that point. And I think that sometimes you do have to work harder to be taken seriously. And they'll see someone who maybe they view as an attractive woman and say, oh, I'll never forget early on in my career, one prospective boss, when I was starting in the business, said, oh, well, we already have an attractive blonde. Like, basically, we don't need another one. Wow. Was the answer. And I said, well, do you have an attractive blonde who speaks several languages and works 24 hours a day? Wow. And he said, no, we don't have one like that. And I said, would y'all like one like that? Oh, wow. And suddenly, I was offered the job. But I don't think he would have said that to a man. And I remember thinking that early on, yeah, there are sometimes where, well, they'll shut you down and say, oh, you know, oh, but I think the challenge for us as women is to work harder to show that we're just as tough as the guys, if not tougher in some cases. And I do think we're making some strides towards the glass ceiling. I'd like to see more. I think when you still look at the landscape of some of the people who are in control at some of the networks, and you look at people who are in some of the hot seats and the key seats, we've made a lot of strides, and I credit it to people like Barbara Walters and others who have really made some tremendous strides in the business, and Diane Sawyer.
Yeah, I was just going to say, who would be influences for you? You know, women influences.
Yeah,
there's a couple right there.
Yeah, right there. I mean, there's so many, and also, but it's funny. I still look. When I walk into work every day, I don't really necessarily look at whether I'm a woman or a man. I look at, did I do a great job as a journalist? And I still believe at the end of the day, your work speaks for itself.